Okay, well, I think we might as well go ahead and get started. So first of all, good afternoon. Thanks to everybody who's joined already. Welcome to this webinar on how to hire refugees in Michigan, put on by the Southeast Michigan Refugee Collaborative, or SEMIRC as we call it. My name is Scott Preston. I'm a special projects manager at Global Detroit, where I co-facilitate the Southeast Michigan Refugee Collaborative. Our collaborative is made up of a few different organizations, a lot of resettlement agencies in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw counties, and other social service organizations that work directly with refugees. Our collaborative is the largest social impact network in the state dedicated to improving the integration outcomes of refugees. And our work is divided into a series of work groups, one of which is employment. This webinar came about through our employment work group, when they noticed an interest in Michigan's private sector enterprises in hiring refugees to shore up their labor force. In the 2010 census, Michigan was the only state that lost population. Subsequently, between 2010 and 2020, Michigan's population exhibited a minimal growth rate, about 2%, and that positions it as the 46th slowest growing state in the nation. By 2025, Michigan's projected to have a net loss of about 14,000 people in annual outmigration. That's the equivalent of a busload of Michiganders leaving the state to permanently relocate every day. According to a report by Bridge Michigan, between now and 2050, the population of Michiganders over 65 is expected to jump up 30%, and residents in the age between 25 and 64, which is the prime working age of the population, that's expected to grow just 2%. So you can see we have some demographic challenges in the state of Michigan, and that population stagnation puts pressure on the economy, reduces the labor force, reduces funding for safety nets like Social Security, reduces home values, and puts the state at risk even of losing political representation. So it's a significant challenge for our state, but fortunately, Michigan is within the top 5 largest recipient destinations for refugees in the nation. And our refugee population represents a really strong, industrious, diverse, and dedicated potential workforce. Furthermore, refugees are more likely to be entrepreneurs than the general population. They create jobs and they bring money into the economy. In 2016 alone, Global Detroit conservatively estimates that refugees contributed between 230 to 295 million to the state's economy, and that was just in 2016 alone. So by hiring refugees, you can not only improve your own talent pipeline, you can also positively contribute to the development of your community and the vitality of the state of Michigan. If you're not muted, I'm going to ask you to please make sure you mute your microphone. This webinar is designed to provide you with an overview of what refugee status is, explore the support systems that refugees are backed by, and discuss the workplace contributions and integration, and answer all your questions about how to hire refugees. So our schedule is as follows. You can see it on the screen in front of you. I'm concluding our introduction now. Then we're going to have a presentation by Christina Field from the refugee resettlement agency SEMIRC, who will talk a little bit about the concept of the refugee, what refugees are, and some of their legal statuses and some of the support services and systems that are in place for refugees. And then we're going to discuss how to actually hire refugees with 2 special guests from the Department of Justice. That would be followed by an employer testimonial from Belinda Cunningham, formerly of Milton Manufacturing, and also a recruiter testimonial from Amplitude Recruiting. The very end, we're going to have about a 30-minute period where you're able to ask questions. So please hold your questions to the end. I'm going to work to activate the chat so you could submit questions there at the end. If that doesn't work, then we'll be able to just raise our hands and I'll call on participants one by one. Also, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to SEMIRC's YouTube account. So if you missed anything or you have questions or you want to revisit something, just remember that you'll be able to watch the presentation in full afterward. Again, please be sure to mute your microphones. And with that, I'll hand the microphone over to Christina Field of SEMIRC.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for that nice introduction. And it's so wonderful to see, everyone on this call, some familiar names and faces and some new ones. I'm going to try to share my screen here. It's saying that it will not allow me to share my screen, Scott. So you can either feel free to bring up the presentation or I can share the screen if given
Okay, I'm
permission.
going to make you a co-host.
Okay,
There we go. That should do it.
let me try again. Okay, wonderful. All right, can you see okay?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, perfect. All right, wonderful. And yeah, just again, thank you so much for everyone for joining this afternoon, taking some time out of a busy Monday schedule during a busy time of year. And just so happy to be able to talk with you all about some topics I'm very passionate about and something that really impacts a lot of lives and our economies here in our community. So I just wanted to share, I'm just sharing a brief presentation here with you today. I'm happy to answer any questions. Just wanted to share a little bit about our refugees' economic impact, both in America and then what that looks like here in Michigan. And then we get some frequently asked questions that I have here around like why hire refugees, who does SEMIRC serve, what employment services do we have for our clients, what support can SEMIRC provide a lot of companies such as yourselves on this webinar. And then, open to any questions following that. So basically, you can see here that this is just around the economic contributions in the U.S. that specifically refugees have made. So Tent recently, just a few months ago actually, came out with this report that was really phenomenal. Again, this was focused on refugees, not a broader scope of immigrants or foreign-born employees. But it was really amazing to see how refugees are contributing billions of dollars worth of taxes, that they're having, about like $69 billion of spending power in America, and that their income, when, it takes a little bit of time for them to get established, but their income is growing year after year and actually ends up being more than the median income of U.S. Households overall. I think it's very exciting to see the entrepreneurial spirit of refugees. 13% of them are entrepreneurs. So we're very, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of refugee-owned businesses, especially in our area. And then many of them are becoming citizens. The statistic that they looked at nationally looked at, a couple decades afterwards. SEMIRC, our refugees are eligible for citizenship after 5 years after arrival, and we have free citizenship services to help them apply for that process. So it's really great to see that, they're becoming citizens as well as also owning homes. So basically, this being said, we can look at this at the national level, and then you see it very applicable to Michigan. So as Scott already said, it's just amazing to see that, Michigan is actually one of the top recipients in the nation for refugees as well as other immigrants. And so again, you can see that there's so many refugees in our area. We are representing Southeast Michigan in particular, but all across the state, it's amazing to see, that our refugees and immigrants are making up like 7-8% of the workforce here in Michigan in a whole variety of industries. Again, contributing billions of dollars in taxes, as well as spending power. And so overall, it's just great to see that our refugees are earning money. They have that spending power, which is increasing, every year, that they're starting businesses, they're gaining their citizenship and voting, buying homes and paying taxes, right in our neighborhoods, right? So this is something very powerful. And even, we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, but even specifically in our area, we, like 15% of businesses, at least are owned by some immigrants. So it's just, something that we wanted to share with you, to paint the broader picture. And then furthermore, we wanted to talk about, and Scott alluded to this as well, is like why hire refugees? And I mean, we've already kind of shared a little bit about that. And Scott, thank you for sharing about the population loss that Michigan's been having. This is one of the main ways that companies are approaching us here at Semiritus. Their main concerns are, they say, their company, they're just having a lot of struggles with labor shortages, like just literally finding people. They also mentioned some things around like unreliable workers, or just not very high like worth ethic and things like that. And you can see even this demographic here that right now there's millions of jobs in Michigan, right? And probably a lot of you on this call are, facing some of that. So we know at Semiritus, like it takes a lot of time and resources. It's very costly for companies to recruit talent, maintain that talent, onboard, train, all of that, right? So it's very exciting to see that immigrants and refugees are actually the main demographic now adding to Michigan's population growth. And actually, most of them are of working age, which is exciting to see, right? Our refugees are so eager to enter the workforce. Like, I swear, sometimes we're picking them up at the airport and that's like one of their first questions. So they really want to work. And we ask, most of our clients now are even working overtime. Like, they'll call me and be like, Christine, I need more work. And I'm like, oh, I thought you were working full time. And like, I'm only working 45 hours a week. I want to work 60. So they're very eager to work. Of course, they're coming with a whole variety of backgrounds, right? But once they are gaining a job, something that we've been looking at and tracking very carefully, especially this past year, is around job retention, because companies said that was something that was really important to them, that it's just really challenging to have like that turnover. So they were saying, like, we looked at clients across our refugee employment programs, and we have a 98% job retention at 90 days. And we could look beyond that as well. And that's one of the main benchmarks. But we only had a very small number of clients who left their job, and that was only to seek, like job upgrades and stuff. So they feel so loyal, especially to that first company, giving them an opportunity. And they just really just, like, yes, it's income, but they feel part of the community, right? Companies say that it's added a lot to like crucial diversity in their workforce, especially when they're looking at DEI metrics and things like that. And just in general, like welcoming newcomers. These are a lot of folks who are in our communities. Like I said, like they're voting, their kids are going to school in our neighborhood, and they're living down the street and things like that. And to give someone a job, and again, I've been working with refugees across America and internationally, like that is such relief that they feel, and they feel like just so much part of the community. So there's so many benefits. But to look at a little bit more closely of like Semiritus interaction in that process. So we are specifically serving Wayne, Macomb, Oakland, and Genesee counties. There might be some like adjacent, but really Southeast Michigan that we are representing here. We have other refugee programs also in Lansing and on the west side of the state. So what I'm sharing today is pretty specific to Southeast Michigan. We have a whole variety to serve refugees in holistic ways, everything from youth programming, digital literacy, immigration services, a lot of social services. But basically what I'm sharing here is we have both national and state programming for employment services. And to emphasize that we're working with, again, we're kind of using refugee sometimes as an umbrella term, but this includes like very specific, what they call OR populations around like refugees, asylees, parolees, Cuban Haitian entrants, special immigration visas. Like there's very specific statuses that we are contracted to serve. And then there's partner agencies who might handle more like different immigrant populations or asylum seekers and things like that. And so we all try to collaborate as best we can. And really we connect with refugees in a whole variety of ways. We do direct resettlement from overseas. We are contracted partners with DHHS for our employment program, a lot of partner agencies, word of mouth, companies such as yourselves, schools, even things like that. So to date, Semiritus, like we're very happy that just our area here, we've served 10,000 people from 43 different countries. And these populations, to be honest, they really just depend on conditions internationally. We get different populations just based on politics. Excuse me. Right now, the main populations that we're serving is like Ukrainian, Syrian, Iraqi, Afghan, Congolese. We have several Spanish speakers. There's a map that you can see in this photo of, we had World Refugee event and people were saying where they were coming from exactly. So yeah, it's just very exciting. And of course, since they're coming from different countries and different contexts, they're coming with a lot of different skills and interests. But for most of our clients, they are entering the workforce in manufacturing, construction, CDL truck driving, IT, food service, retail, cable installation, like we have accountants, it's like you name it. So it's been very exciting. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So that being said, we engage our folks really pretty early in the process. So when we get a new client, like we kind of hit the ground running. We help them with all their documents, like social security cards, employment authorization, I-94, like all of that stuff. And then we start talking to them actually like their first week around getting a job. So we're helping them to look for the job. We do weekly like cultural orientations, readiness workshops, so they understand like the work culture of America. We help them make a resume, to apply for jobs, interview for jobs. We do like the follow-up to make sure that, you know, like there's a potential or like an option for like job upgrade, connect them with English classes, vocational trainings, make sure they have proper work clothing, like, I don't know, all those things. So the main thing is like, yes, we're helping them to connect with jobs, but also we're trying to assist them and eliminate any barriers that might be a factor of them gaining successful employment. So to be honest, most thing is transportation, as a lot of you probably know here in the Motor City. Sometimes English, there might be some health concerns or digital literacy, childcare, things like that. So we're trying to help like alleviate those concerns and then help them enter the workforce. But overall, our goal is to help the client to become self-sufficient, right? So we're not just trying to tick a box of like, are they employed at any job? Yes or no, check. Like we really care that it's something that is a good match for them and that it provides a stable enough income to cover their household expenses for their family. And then our programs can go up to 5 years. So yes, we work with them when they're very new in America, but we care about that career progression. So that being said, and lastly here, like how would we love to work with more companies? Excuse me. So most of our companies will contact Semiritus and they'll just tell us like what their staffing needs are. They say we have these vacant positions, looking for these kind of skills. Sometimes they'll forecast, oh, in a couple months, I'm going to open up a facility, that kind of thing. And we just really try to help find the best matches possible, right? We know that when we have a good match, you know, like the training goes smoother, there's higher job satisfaction, more satisfaction for both, you know, the company and the employee, and better job retention, all the outcomes, right? So we really try to find the best match. Then we help to make sure the client has documentation. All of our clients are legal to work. Department of Justice will be talking about this next. They'll dive deeper into that. We do have free immigration services, you know, to make sure that that they are on top of, you know, adjusting status as needed to make sure that they're lawfully, you know, allowed to work and remain in America. And we can communicate that with you. And then a lot of it, to be honest, what we do is just like interpretation and translation. So yes, we have bilingual staff. I think we probably have almost 20 languages now on staff, and other supportive services as well. And so we can help provide interpreters during interview processes, trainings to make sure it's clear of like the responsibilities, duties of the role. Sometimes we help, like, you know, we can't do interpretation on site every day, everywhere for all of our clients. But we help in key points of like communication around like feedback, right? Positive, or maybe some areas for improvement. Sometimes there might be changes in the work, right? So there might be more significant events whereby like a client might tell us like, oh, can you tell my boss my wife is expecting a baby? And if I don't come to work, it's not that I'm intending to be a no call, no show, but I'm at the hospital, you know, with my wife for a couple of days. Or the companies might say like, oh, there's a change in schedule, or we have a new position opening up that we think, you know, this employee would be really a good fit for. Could you talk to them? You know, can we discuss this as a possibility? So we do a lot of like that communication piece. Like I mentioned, we also are trying to help teach refugees around like that work culture of America, what to wear to work, the soft skills, as well as the hard skills. All of that. Some companies have told us like, oh goodness, we have a very new arrival in America and they don't have a bank account. Like, how should we pay them? And so we've even brought, bank companies on site to do like, mass enrollments for employees and companies interested in that, because we just want to make it as easy as possible. Our clients ask a lot about taxes. So we make sure to educate them on that, and we try to connect them with free, high quality tax preparers. And then really it's just, again, going back to those aspects of like eliminating barriers. We really just discuss like what are potential challenges. So, maybe they have issues with transportation. We have awesome companies who have found ways to provide transportation to our clients. We also have transportation grants and like Uber funds where we want to make sure they get to work. English classes, we're working with partners to do on-site English classes that's related to work, so that they're building those skills and communicating easier. Medical appointments, we've had clients who need glasses and things like that, or whatever they might need. So please keep that in mind, because we're happy to help in any way possible. Also, we've had some companies say like, oh, this is great, Samaritas. We love working with refugees here in Southeast Michigan, but we have other locations across Michigan, across the US, and we're happy to connect folks. So like I said, we have other Samaritas offices. We work with other partners across the state. LRS has an awesome national program called PRE with different sites across America we can connect you to. And then we just love engaging folks in different events, like job fairs that we put on, trainings like this, things like that. So again, all this being said, I know I covered quite a few topics here, but we're working with a lot of newcomers. And again, our goal is we'd love to connect them with more companies, as it's like a win-win-win for everyone all the way around. So really, I would be happy to share any other information, like like our flyers and handouts. This is my contact information, and we have different offices across our area. Put our website there. So if you're having any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. That was a lot of information, perfectly delivered. That was perfect timing, actually. And for anyone on the call who's wondering, how do we get in touch with potential refugees to hire, Christina Field, your contact information, your display, you would be the person of contact there. Okay. All right, so I'm going to send out a list of contact information with resettlement agencies after the call today. That'll include Christina's, and those would be the people to contact if you're looking to shore up your talent pipeline. And now I'm going to give the mic over for our next session, which gets a little more into the weeds in terms of the legal specifics of hiring refugees. And we have two special guests from the DOJ. I honestly couldn't think of anyone better positioned to present on this topic. So we have Ramya Sekaran and Laura Varela Adio with us today, and they're going to walk us through some of these legal weeds of how to hire actually refugees.
Thanks so much, Scott, and thank you everyone for your time and having us. I'm here with my colleague Ramya Sekaran from the Immigrant and Employee Rights Section, which is a part of the Civil Rights Division at the United States Department of Justice. Ramya, I'm wondering, is there a different view?
And if you're having trouble presenting, I can also present those slides as well.
Maybe, Scott, if you don't mind, that might be might be good. If you can do that. Thank you.
All right, can you see that?
Yes, perfect. All right, thank you so much. So like I said, Ramya and I are both from the Immigrant and Employee Rights Section in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. So I'm going to use IER instead of saying Immigrant and Employee Rights Section. IER investigates and sues employers that violate a part of the Immigration and Nationality Act that prohibits employment discrimination based on citizenship status or national origin. It is actually the anti-discrimination provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act. A lot of employers, many employers are unaware that this provision actually exists. And the next slide. So under the anti-retaliation provision, which is 8 U.S.C. 1324B, the discrimination is prohibited if it's based on citizenship or immigration status discrimination, if it's based on national origin, unfair documentary practices, and retaliation. We're going to go through detail on each type of unlawful action throughout today's presentation. But so you know, unfair documentary practices is the most common type of discrimination that our office sees, and many people commit it and don't even know that it's illegal. Next slide. Okay, so citizenship status discrimination occurs in hiring, firing, or recruitment or referral for a fee because of a worker's citizenship or immigration status. So, for example, if an employer puts out a job ad and says that they're only interested in U.S. citizens, they don't want anyone else to apply, that would be an example of citizenship status discrimination. We actually settled not too long ago against a very big company who really just wanted H-2B visa workers to apply for jobs, which discriminated against all the protected individuals under the anti-retaliation provision. So that occurs really when you're preferring one citizenship status over another. And one thing to keep in mind is that discrimination based on terms and conditions of employment is actually not included. So our office runs a hotline, and we'll get some calls from folks that say, hey, I'm an individual who was granted asylum, and I'm getting the worst shifts every night. So I think that maybe my employer is giving me the worst shift because I'm an individual granted asylum. That's a term and condition, and unfortunately, under our statute, we don't enforce discrimination based on terms and conditions. In addition, for national origin discrimination in hiring and firing, we're limited to employers that have between 4 and 15 employees. Okay, next slide, Scott, please. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, is a preference in hiring based on citizenship status ever permissible? Well, actually, yes. And there are exceptions to the rule that are written directly into the statute. So a law, regulation, executive order, or government contract may require that an employer places citizenship status restrictions on hiring. So sometimes you'll have an employer who receives a government contract, and on this particular contract, they say that it's restricted to U.S. citizens only. But an employer can't then go and say to all the applicants, I'm sorry, we only want U.S. citizens because of government contract. So the federal contractor is limited to that one particular position to limit it to U.S. citizens, but not to their entire workforce. In some other situations, employers can actually refuse to hire people based on their citizenship or immigration status because they're not protected from this type of discrimination. So for example, employers can say that they do not want to hire people with a particular visa, with a particular visa, or they can say, listen, we just are not able to sponsor an individual right now. That is actually lawful under our statute in particular, 8 U.S.C. 1324B. So there are, and I say that because there are other federal, state, and local laws that actually might prohibit discrimination based on citizenship that our statute doesn't prohibit. Okay, Scott, next slide. Okay, so national origin discrimination. So IER also investigates employment discrimination based on national origin. National origin discrimination is treating employees differently based on the country that they came from, or their ancestry, or their accent, or because they appear to be from a certain country. So, for example, if a company fired a worker of Asian descent because the company wrongly believed that Asian people were to blame for the COVID pandemic, that would be a violation of our statute. And of course, this can happen in the process of hiring or firing, or in the recruitment or referral for a fee. And I've talked a little bit about recruitment or referral for a fee, but a lot of staffing agencies will recruit workers. But if the employer that hires the staffing agency puts a particular restriction that violates our statute, the staffing agency and the employer, we would investigate both. So the staffing companies receiving a fee in order to find particular employees, we would actually investigate both. And generally, I said this before, for hiring and firing, generally IER has jurisdiction over employers that have between 4 and 14 employees. The EEOC actually does cover national origin discrimination with employers that have 15 or more employees. And the law that the law that the EEOC enforces is actually broader and includes discrimination in terms and conditions of employment that we do not cover and that I had briefly covered previously. Okay, Scott, next slide. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about unfair documentary practices, which is the most common type of discrimination that IER sees. And a lot of people don't realize that it is illegal. So unfair documentary practices refers to discrimination based on citizenship status or national origin that occurs when employers are getting proof of someone's ability to work. So it's a little bit abstract, but what does that mean? What are unfair documentary practices? So they occur when an employer requests more or different documents than are required. So, for example, a worker in Section 1 of the I-9, which we'll touch on, but in Section 1 of the I-9, a worker might indicate that he or she is a lawful permanent resident. But then for the documents that they provide, let's say they provide a driver's license and social security card, which is a List B and a List C document. But the employer sees that they indicated that they were a lawful permanent resident in Section 1 and demands that the employee provides a permanent residency card. So that employer just committed unfair documentary practice because based on the person's citizenship or immigration status, they requested a PRC when the employee did comply and provided a List B and List C with the driver's license and social security card. Again, this could happen when an employer sees someone's last name, or they say that there's a Hispanic surname. So they say, you know what, for you, I'm going to ask for a List A, B, and C document, really just based on someone's citizenship or national origin. And the same thing goes for employers who actually reject documents that appear genuine. So again, and Ramya and I will talk about this, but our section runs a hotline, and we will receive plenty of calls from employers. We have employer hotline, and the employers will call us and say, I have this transportation boarding letter. I've never seen it before. I don't think I can accept it. So thankfully, those particular employers will call us because that is actually a valid List B document. But there are a lot of employers out there who will see a transportation boarding letter and immediately reject it simply because they don't know what it is or it's foreign to them. That would actually be a violation of our statute. Another type of unfair documentary practice is when an employer actually specifies which documents they want to see. So again, if they see that someone indicated that they're a lawful permanent resident, they'll say, I'm sorry, I don't want any other documents other than your PRC card, your permanent residency card. That would be an unfair documentary practice. Okay, next slide, Scott, please. Okay, so again, I've touched on the I-9. The purpose of the Form I-9 is to establish a worker's identity and work authorization. The form is not to verify an employee's particular immigration status. So U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or as we know, USCIS, is responsible for the Form I-9, and they have an abundance of resources for you on how to complete the Form I-9. They have I-9 Central, and they have the M274 Handbook for Employers. These are amazing resources. IER does not actually administer the Form I-9, but we do investigate allegations of discrimination in the I-9 process. So instructions for the I-9 are available online. The Form I-9 also has the lists of acceptable documents, which I'm sure you all have seen. If you're employed, you've seen the lists of acceptable documents, which describe the documents that employees can present to establish their identity and permission to work. It is important for employers to make sure that employees have access to all pages of the instructions and the lists of acceptable documents. Employees can also show receipts in some circumstances. And again, the M274 and the I-9 Central talk about receipts. Again, receipts can be a very foreign idea, that instead of providing your social security card, you're providing a receipt, or you're providing a receipt for a list A document. It sounds bizarre, but they are legitimate. And so looking at I-9 Central, looking at the M274 is so helpful when they talk about kind of just documents that you might see during the I-9 process. You can also call us. You can call the Immigrant and Employee Rights section. We have an employer hotline. We have an employee hotline. You can even ask the employee to call us if they have concerns or questions, or vice versa, or you can call us together. But we're a resource that's available from 9 to 5 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Okay, Scott, next slide. Okay, so section 1, right, we've talked about this a little bit, is the portion of the Form I-9 that the worker completes, not the employer. The worker completes this Form I-9 after an offer and an acceptance of employment. The worker should fill out section 1 on or before his or her first day of work. Okay, Scott, next slide. Okay. So in section 1 of the Form I-9, these are the 4, hopefully you can see that. These are the 4 citizenship statuses that workers can choose from. The first 3 are specific statuses. So U.S. citizen, U.S. national, and lawful permanent resident. And I've talked about lawful permanent resident before because a lot of employers mistakenly will require a PRC if someone checks box 3, the lawful permanent resident box. But so the 4th is a non-citizen authorized to work. It is a broad category that includes anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, a U.S. national, or lawful permanent resident. So some non-U.S. citizens authorized to work, which is box 4, are asylum applicants or folks who are temporarily authorized to work. And some non-citizens authorized to work are indefinitely authorized to work, like workers granted asylum or refugee status. The non-citizen authorized to work category includes a field for a worker to enter the expiration date if they are temporarily authorized to work. So some non-U.S. citizens authorized to work have an employment authorization document, which is an EAD, that actually has an expiration date. But to make things as complicated as possible, some EADs have an expiration date, but their status doesn't expire. So for example, even though someone granted refugee status may have an EAD, the expiration of the EAD is actually unrelated to the refugee's permission to live and work in the United States. The same holds true for other statuses as well. For example, U.S. citizens still have permission to live and work in the United States, even though their passport, which is a List A document, expires. So non-citizens whose permission to work doesn't end should simply write NA in the expiration date field, which we've indicated on the slide. Employers cannot ask any worker to see an immigration document or a document with essentially a valid expiration date. Also, workers need to provide proof of their U.S. CIS or A number. A reminder is that an employee is not required to show documents that prove the status that they have selected. Again, I've mentioned this a couple times because the purpose of the I-9, again, is to establish that workers are authorized to work, not to provide proof of their specific status. Okay, Scott, next slide, please. Okay, so the employer completes section 2 within 3 business days of their first day of work. Workers must present their documents to the employer for this process to occur. This is the list of acceptable documents that workers and employers use for the Form I-9. Again, it's a little small, but you will be receiving this slide after the presentation. So when verifying a worker's documentation, employers cannot tell a worker to present a specific document, which we've touched on. Employers cannot ask for more or different documents than are necessary, and employers cannot reject valid documents. So an employer's lack of familiarity with a particular document is not an excuse to reject it. And again, I kind of mentioned this before with a transportation boarding letter, which a lot of folks have not seen before, but it is a valid List B document. So again, some other examples would be an employer asking non-citizens for proof of their immigration status, like asking a lawful permanent resident for their PRC card. Employers not accepting valid documents, like an ID or social security card from a worker who they think is from another country. Employers rejecting valid documents, like an I-94 with an asylum stamp, because the employer has never seen that document before, and it's a little suspicious because the worker wasn't born in the United States. Employers and workers, again, can call IER with any questions they have about what documents are acceptable or not. And again, please visit I-9 Central and the M274 handbook, which are amazing resources. So again, these rules are for verifying people's identity and permission to work. There are, of course, situations where an employer must ask a worker for a specific document, like when a company asks a new employee for a driver's license because the job involves driving duties. In that case, the request for a license is for a different reason. So the rules I just discussed do not apply. Okay, Scott, next slide. Okay, so, sorry. So employers should not re-verify certain documents, such as permanent residency cards or List B documents, or any documents that are presented by U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ramya.
So much, and I know that we're running a little bit behind on time, so I'll make the next few slides brief. Scott, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, that would be great. Okay, so as Laura mentioned, Laura really covered a lot of how to fill out the I-9, some of the most common questions that will come up when you're filling out the I-9. This slide addresses some, slightly more nuanced questions that do come up pretty commonly. So we strongly encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions at all, basic or more complex as an employer. When you're working with the new hire to fill out the I-9, it is always better, to reach out to us and to try to get information about how to do it correctly, as opposed to perhaps inadvertently rejecting a document that is actually valid and then not hiring somebody who would be, a great fit for your company. So, a couple of things to just keep in mind. Sometimes what are known as work permits or employment authorization documents, or EADs, may be expired on the document itself, but the individual may have an extension that has been granted on a blanket basis by the federal government, or that you can actually see is extended based on additional paperwork that the individual provides. So just be aware of that. Just because an EAD is expired on its face does not mean that it is actually expired and not valid. And if you have questions about that, check out I-9 Central or reach out to us. Individuals can use receipts for documents that are lost, stolen, or have been destroyed. So if somebody doesn't have the actual document, they may be able to provide a receipt that would be valid for a particular period of time. And then, again, any other questions, reach out to us. Next slide, please. So like I said, employment authorization documents can be extended. It's helpful to know that some extensions are evidenced with paperwork that the worker will have, but there are other extensions where there is no additional documentation that the worker will have, but an extension has been granted on that employment authorization document by the federal government. And you can learn more about that at the link that is on this slide. Next slide, please. I'll just quickly mention the Form I-94 is a document that can be used in different ways for the Form I-9. There is a Form I-94 that is on List A that has to be presented with a foreign passport. Form I-94 also can be a List C document or a receipt for a List A document. And the Form I-94 can look different. So this slide is a really great resource for the different ways in which a Form I-94 can appear. And again, we really strongly encourage employers and workers to reach out to us with questions about the Form I-94, because we do run into situations where they are improperly rejected because the employer isn't sure how it can be used for the I-9. So do contact us with questions. Next slide, please. And this is a great slide. Again, these slides are going to be circulated. So this is another great reference sheet that shows how different types of, how the I-94 can be used in different ways by different groups of immigrants. So refugees, asylees, LPRs, Afghan and Ukrainian parolees are able to use the I-94 in a particular way. So please do refer to this sheet and let us know if you have any questions. Next slide, please. I'll just mention very briefly that a social security number is not required to complete the Form I-9. So, we know a lot of new immigrants, it might take them some time to get their social security card and social security number. They do not have to have a social security number to complete the I-9. It can be left blank as long as they have appropriate documentation to complete the I-9. And other agencies have guidance on, when and whether a social security number is actually required. So we encourage you to consult that as well. Next slide. I'll mention briefly, E-Verify is a program, that some employers may use, some of you may use it. The E-Verify does not change the process for verifying authorization to work in many ways. Workers don't need separate documents for E-Verify. In some situations, some documents have to be photocopied, but in general, employers should not be asking for additional documents for E-Verify. A social security number is required for E-Verify eventually, but a worker can still start working without a social security number, and you can indicate in E-Verify that you are waiting on the social security number to complete the person's E-Verify case. So keep that in mind as well. Next slide. And you can go to the next one. Okay, I'll mention briefly that our statute prohibits retaliation. So employers are not permitted to retaliate against workers who contact our hotline, who file a complaint with us, who otherwise try to assert their rights, the rights that we described today. So just, be aware of that protection. Next slide. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about our hotline, and our hotline is a wonderful resource. We strongly encourage you to reach out to us for help avoiding discrimination in the Form I-9 and E-Verify process and in the hiring process more generally. If you have questions about social security number requirements, is it required? When is it required? Please reach out to us. If you have questions about whether U.S. citizenship is required for, a particular, or if you believe U.S. citizenship is required for a job, how do you go about implementing that requirement without improperly discriminating against a large group of applicants? Reach out to us. So please do feel free to contact us. Next slide, please. And this is our hotline number. Feel free to jot it down, but these slides will be circulated as well. We're available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Eastern. Importantly, calls can be anonymous. So, whether you're a worker or an employer, if you feel nervous about, providing your name, you don't have to. Language services are available. We can offer interpretation in most languages. So please do reach out to us. And we have a separate number for individuals with hearing disabilities. Next slide. Oh, and that is it. So, with that, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us today. I know that we threw a lot of information at you in a short period of time, but we really appreciate, your interest in hiring, refugees, asylees, and others who are new to the country. And please do reach out to our hotline with any questions at all. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to the organizers for having us.
Huge thank you to Remy and Laura. That was so much really important information. So don't worry about the time. I think the important thing is that we were able to get you guys to walk us through all of that complexity. So we have two more quick speakers. I'd like to invite Belinda Cunningham, formerly HR at Milton Manufacturing in Michigan, to talk a little bit about her experience hiring refugees and some of the programs or systems she put in place to facilitate integration. And I'm sorry, Belinda, I know I scheduled you initially for 10 minutes. If you could maybe cut it down closer to 5, that'd be really.
That's not a problem. That is definitely not a problem. So thanks everyone, and I appreciate you for having me, Scott. So one of the things that we learned, and I shared with Scott, is we had great success in the company that I was working with. We probably hired over a period of 2 years, I would say 80 team members who were actually refugees from Haiti. So there were a lot of lessons learned there that I would share with any employers. And that is some of the things that I wish I had known before that we could have done differently is maybe started having meetings with employees beforehand to explain to them what a refugee is. Because when I use the word ignorant, I don't mean it in a negative term. I mean it in the truest sense that ignorance is simply a lack of knowledge. So a lot of times we had a lot of with our employees because all they saw were a group of people. Some of them had very limited English or couldn't speak English at all. And their attitudes were, you know, these people snuck into the country and they're taking our job. So I had to explain to people, you know, we have a legal obligation. There's a process that we have to go through to make sure that people are authorized to work in the United States. So we ensure that everybody is legally authorized to work in the United States, no matter where they're from, no matter what they look like. That's our process that we go through. The other thing that we did after a couple of lessons learned is make sure that we took the time and do a Q&A with employees. What is a refugee? Why are they refugees? Because some people thought, you know, there were rumors going around the production floor that all of these people had been exiled from their country because they were murderers or something like that. So there was just no end to the rumor mill. So we learned the hard way that it was important to meet with the employees beforehand, explain to them what we were doing and why. We also brought in some community leaders from that particular community to come in and do a Q&A with employees. So it kind of dovetailed and fit nicely with our DE&I program. So it helped people understand. We talked a little bit about how there may be a group of employees who are all working together, and we have to do that because we may have a 5-person work cell. We're going to put all of these employees on that work cell, and the reason that we're doing that is because only one of the 4 can speak the language. And so just being proactive, making sure that you educate your employees all levels within the organization beforehand, and then also making sure that those employees, those that are refugees, have an opportunity to come in, get familiar with the facility, and also do some Q&A with them and find out what their concerns are. What are the barriers? What is it that we can do to make it as culturally appropriate? So ultimately, it was a great experience. I would jump on, you know, at the very beginning, I was writing down Christina's email address because I plan on reaching out to you to see if there's an opportunity to partnership in the future, because now I serve as an HR consultant, generally for nonprofits and small to mid-sized businesses. So it would be great if we could collaborate. So I'm a huge fan. And I hope I kept it at 5 minutes, Scott, or less.
That was great. Thanks a lot, Belinda.
You're welcome.
I think one of the interesting things about the experience that you raised is, I mean, it sounds like when people go to hire refugees, I've heard concerns in the past about cultural orientation and, you know, like, do we have to make exceptions for people for prayer time and things like that? But it sort of sounds like in your experience, the bulk of the cultural orientation that was needed was really for the employees that were not refugees.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. That was definitely the bulk of it in the beginning. Yes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, thank you so much for stopping in today, Belinda.
Thank you.
Really
thank you.
Being on the webinar. Okay, and I'll hand it over now to our final presenter, Dania with Amplitude Recruiting.
Hi, I'm Dana Azaparty. I'm an account manager for Amplitude HR. We work very closely with Christina and her team over there at SEMIRC, but we are a staffing company based here in Metro Detroit. However, we do have customers all over the US, and a lot of our customers are very interested when especially our president of our organization and our sales team lets them know that we work with SEMIRC and the refugees. So we have hired and staffed over 350 refugees for probably the past 2 years at 20 plus of our customers. I will tell you that it's been a learning curve. So, and our president, Mike Kernan, he actually started this. He came up with this idea long before we met Semiritas, before the situation going over in Ukraine and Russia. He saw a need, and I think around 2020. And with some other refugees that were in the area. And then he got partnered up with his really good friend who is from Ukraine. And then we found Semiritas. So we are so proud that we are partnered with them. So some of the things that we have done in order to streamline the process is Amplitude HR actually hired employees that were bilingual to help us speak to the employees that we are going to staff at our customers. So the biggest challenge in my opinion is getting the customers on board with the refugees. So a lot of the questions that we get when we are sitting in a customer meeting is, how do we communicate with them? How are they going to know how to do things? They don't read English, they don't write, they don't speak English, they don't write English. And then of course we have to gently inform them that they're not allowed to do that. And then we also inform them that we have ways around this, right? From translators, we have hired individuals that can translate their work documents, their work processes, and it has worked out so well for us. We have had so many success stories. We've had customers saying they are too afraid to have people, for a safety reason, not be able to either understand English or speak English, to us helping them streamline that, like I said. And now they're super happy with the one, we've dropped turnover, and most of our refugees don't speak English. They just want to work and they're happy. They're getting a fair wage, obviously as fair as we can provide, right? So from what they're used to. A lot of our refugees are also getting, like Christina mentioned, transportation. We have refugees that we have placed in Alabama, in North Carolina, in Ohio. So we have helped our customers help them. So from helping them with their housing, from getting them some furniture, whatever we need to provide for them to get them started. We just want to have a humanitarian mission along with Semiritas so that they feel respected when they're here, right? So we do our best to help guide their fears, because our clients are just as fearful as they are fearful as well. So we have done our best to help them. And one of our success stories, I think Christina has mentioned it all the time, every time I see her. She hugs me, she tells me about one of our success stories. She has brought an individual to us. I was able to help this person find a position as a translator. They hired them in within less than the 90-day mark, and he's thriving. So we have a lot of those success stories. Most of our customers are hiring our refugees so that they are their employees now, and we help our customers with that process as well. But I cannot speak enough about our refugees. Like I said, they want to work. They have lowered turnover for our customers, and they're appreciative. They want to be here. They want to work, and they just want to be, on their own and independent.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dana. It's really encouraging to hear all of the sort of good that has been able to be done through your organization working with refugees, and that they've been helpful for you and your organization. Well, we're somehow not too over time at all. So I'd like to open it up to the floor. If you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you so that you can ask your question, or you can put the... While we're waiting, I suppose I have a question that I can pitch to maybe our DOJ guest here, or maybe Christina at Semiritas. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see from employers when hiring refugees?
I can address that, but Christina, do you have anything you want to address first, or?
I have some, but go ahead, Ramya.
Okay. So, I'll speak to in the context of the I-9 in particular. We do get employers often that are confused about or will reject employment authorization documents that have an extension. In particular, sometimes we see for individuals who have extensions that are granted by Federal Register Notice, which is on, federal government Department of Homeland Security website, but there isn't a paper that each individual worker gets. Employers don't always understand that the Federal Register Notice is sufficient to extending that, employment authorization document for all the workers. So that's definitely like one of the more tricky areas that, we see mistakes, and we strongly encourage questions to our hotline so that we can help you navigate that as an employer. I think definitely we get lots of questions about I-94s, the Form I-94, and how it can be used for the I-9, as I mentioned before. So those are definitely some of the more common ones. Laura, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you captured it.
Christina, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it was pretty similar, because I think, and that's why we're trying to assist and follow up with our refugees and companies, is sometimes we've been there to help on the original documentation when they get hired, to help them get through the door. Amplitude has done like an amazing job doing this as well. Like, I mean, we've sat with companies for hours to complete like I-94s or like the I-9s and all of that with the companies. So we're happy to assist, and then our folks stay at the companies, and then just as Ramya was saying, like, it looks like their EAD, their employment authorization document, like expires, but they're still eligible to work. And so that's when I think, like, I mean, we don't like follow up forever. So we're doing our best to keep track of folks and help on immigration services and companies so that there's no hiccups. But we have literally experienced companies who are like, oh, you're laid off, like you can't work here anymore because your documents are expired. And especially for our refugees, like they get confused and they're working really hard. So it's not like a performance issue. Even the companies are like, we want you to stay on board, but your documents expired. So that's why we've been trying to like educate folks more of just that process. And I love, Laura and Ramya, how you said of like, oh, and to make it extra confusing for folks, their status is fine, but their document has an expiration date. So that's why like we love Department of Justice, like your IR, like you folks have been so amazing to help like just provide that reassurance. And again, we completely understand from like an HR perspective, like companies are like, but wait, like this says like an expiration. So it completely makes sense. So we just appreciate everything Department of Justice has done to help people navigate that and have peace of mind to be like, okay, they applied, here's the receipt. We worked with companies. Sometimes they'll ask us and be like, hey, so-and-so, like, are you aware that their documents are expiring? And we can tell them right away, like, oh, they saw our immigration specialist, they already applied, we have on record their receipt, and sometimes we email it off that day and then they can see. So again, like we just really appreciate the collaboration on that.
All right, well,
Yeah.
it looks like we have a couple additional questions in the chat and a hand raised. I'm just going to go in the order that I see them. First question is for Dana. Are you providing free transportation to employees, in particular the refugees, and how do you handle language limitations at work?
So I will just say that we have helped with transportation in certain areas where we can, as well as especially in the out-of-state, with the out-of-state customers. So we've actually relocated people to Alabama, North Carolina, and Ohio. So we've helped with transportation there, as well as worked with SEMIRC with some of their transportation. I'm not sure what you call those programs, but we'll call them transportation programs. So in that aspect, but as far as the language barriers, again, we have hired people in our office who are bilingual, but when it comes to our customers, they have been actually very great, even in the beginning when they're a little leery of using Google Translate to communicate. And then we have helped in the process of either putting a translator there for from one day to a couple of weeks to help with the training process, as well as translated their employee documents as well as their work instructions. So that has helped streamline the process of their training.
Great, thank you. And we have a participant with a hand raised. Her name is Sarah. Let me unmute her now. All right, Sarah, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think I did it on accident.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry.
Right. Oh, you mean you raised your hand on accident?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. Well, we'll go to the chat then. Let me just disable talking. Okay, so our next question is, do we have a list of names of employers who are interested in hiring refugees and immigrants? There is a list actually through the Southeast Michigan Refugee Collaborative. And are there any special new policies for refugees from Ukraine, Palestine, or Israel? That's a really good question. I'm not aware of any policy changes for Palestinians or Israelis. Sometimes there can be something called special protective status, or sorry, temporary protective status, which allows people with visas to sort of continue to stay in the US after they expire until certain situations are remediated. But maybe some of our staff from DOJ or SEMIRC might know of any other potential changes.
Yeah, I can say just regarding, well, I'll first say all the rules that we described with respect to filling out the Form I-9 apply to individuals regardless of citizenship status, right? Or regardless of, where they specifically come from. So, as long as somebody has appropriate documentation that they can show, they can, complete the I-9 and go ahead and get started working. But I can mention that there are some special policies that apply to particular groups of Ukrainians who have come to the United States through the Uniting for Ukraine program. And so we have a fact sheet that I'm going to drop in the chat that addresses some of the specific questions that might come up for those individuals. And that is definitely a resource we encourage you to take a look at.
Perfect, thank you. And the next question, what are Michigan's numbers of immigrants versus refugees? And how do employers hire immigrants? And what are the agencies? So regarding numbers, Christina, do you know how many refugees have been resettled in Michigan in recent years?
So I know that we have 84,000 total, which I think is probably a conservative number because we get a lot of folks coming from other states. We get so many because they really love the welcoming community here. And then we have other folks who are being processed, like their cases pending and things like that, but they're still even eligible for work. So I put it in the chat because I don't know exactly which numbers that you're looking for, but there's a good helpful document from American Immigration Council. So if you, I hope you have access to that document. If not, feel free, I could email it to you. But that has so many statistics specifically about immigrants in Michigan in terms of like how many residents there are, their citizenship status, education level. Like it's a very nice report that's just bullet point statistics. So I think it'd be pretty quick reference for you. But if you need more information beyond that, let me know. In terms of like, well, yeah, I guess that's just immigrants. If you want numbers for refugees, that is a little bit more specific. And it's a little bit different, I would say, this year with some newer populations coming in. So we normally have like a pipeline. So this is for all refugee resettlement agencies, right? Whether it's SEMIRC, USCRA, JFS or anything like that. So Catholic Charities. So it's like we do direct resettlement, as I mentioned before, from overseas. And every year, basically at the national level, they set out like targets of how many refugees will come in across America. And then it breaks down into different sites and different agencies and all of that. However, again, it really just depends on politics, right? Like you can imagine, it could be based on presidential elections. It could be based on COVID. It could be, there could be a lot of factors that influence the travel. And then on top of that, this year, there's other people who might, so like we have a projection that SEMIRC is going to receive like 750. That's just like, pure refugees, but that does not include any other populations who might come on their own, right? So Cuban and Haitian entrants, like asylees, Ukrainian parolees, special immigration, like they can actually all come on their own, and that's thousands of people. And so like it's hard to project exactly like who exactly will come and when. But anyways, we could get real nitty gritty with that. But if you want to talk, I'd be happy to talk offline about what those numbers might look like.
Yeah, and regarding other refugee agencies, there are 4 in the Southeast Michigan area, which is the footprint of the Southeast Michigan Refugee Collaborative. SEMIRC is the largest. Then there's also Jewish Family Services, which is mainly based in Washtenaw, U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants, USCRI, and Catholic Charities. Our next question is, who or what is the best point of contact for more specific I-9 questions later on?
Yeah, and I put the hotline information in the chat. So there's an employer hotline and an employee hotline. If you have a question, just call the hotline and someone, the attorney or the staff member handling the hotline will be able to answer your questions. Ideally.
Perfect. There's another question about the links in the chat and whether or not they will be made available after this webinar. And yes, absolutely, we can send those links out in a post-webinar email as well. Well, yeah, so thanks again for coming today. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to send me an email. You'll get an email from me with resources after the webinar. So, all right, have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.